Welcome everyone to the November 2024 edition of our NEP 2020 Orientation and Sensitization Program. We are excited to have you join us for this enriching event. The edition brings an exciting lineup of sessions covering the 8 core NEP themes delivered by a distinguished panel of experts. We would like to thank all of you for participating and joining us this evening. We encourage you to actively participate throughout the program, ask questions, engage in discussions, and share your insights. Your involvement will not only deepen your understanding, but also contribute to a vibrant exchange of ideas for everyone. To introduce briefly myself, I'm Prakash Armugaswamy. You must have seen emails from me. I'm one of the coordinators at the Malviya Mission Center here at Ayuka in Pune. I'm joined by Mr. Zamir Manor, who is one of the other coordinators at our center. And you'll be probably contacting him later for assignments and certificates and such. So this evening, we are delighted to begin our first session on academic leadership, governance, and management. It is an honor to welcome back Dr. Garima Malik to our program, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to her. Dr. Garima Malik is a faculty member at the Center for Policy Research in Higher Education at the National Institute of Education Planning and Administration, NEPA, in New Delhi. She holds a PhD in economics from the Ohio State University, USA. Prior to her tenure at NEPA, Dr. Malik served as a faculty member at the Department of Economics at the University of Delhi. She has also been a fellow at the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations and has worked as an economist with Tata Services Limited and PricewaterhouseCoopers. At the Center for Policy Research in Higher Education, Dr. Malik has played a pivotal role coordinating a significant research project on the governance and management of higher education in India. Her extensive publications include articles in respected journals and presentations at both national and international conferences. Notably, she co-edited the Indian Higher Education Report 2015, published by Routledge in 2016. Alongside Professor N.V. Varghese, former Vice Chancellor of NEPA, who will be speaking to us tomorrow in this program as well. This and subsequent volumes have become essential resources for researchers studying Indian higher education sector. Additionally, Dr. Malik co-edited Governance and Management of Higher Education in India, published by SAGE in 2020. Her current research focuses primarily on governance and management within higher education. She has also led the Indian research team for a multi-country study organized by the UNESCO, UNESCO's International Institute for Education Planning in Paris, on planning for flexible learning pathways in higher education in collaboration with NEPA. She has also completed a study on assessment and evaluation in Telangana's higher education at the request of Telangana State Council of Higher Education. With this, I will request Professor Malik to start her presentation. Participants are requested to raise their hand on Zoom if they have a question during the presentation, and we will have time for discussions towards the end of the session. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Professor Prakash Aragomasamy. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank you as well as Professor Dhruv Saikia for inviting me for this session, very important session in the NEP Orientation and Sensitization Program of the MMTTC Inter-University Center of Astronomy and Astrophysics in Pune. So it's a pleasure to be here. I had given a session about a year back, and it was really wonderful, and it's really nice to be back again. So my presentation is on academic leadership, governance, and management, which is my area of research also. It is on leadership, governance, and management. So I work in this area, and I've been working in this area for the past decade or so. Otherwise, I'm from economics, an economist. So, but now I'm working in the area of higher education. So it's basically I will be talking about governance and management of higher education and governance and management of higher education in India. But what I will do is I will also talk a little bit about the background of higher education. What is the context of higher education? Giving you some data and figures, and also then talk about the governance and management issues that are afflicting our higher education system right now. And I will keep talking about NEP 2020 in the context of leadership, governance, and management. And at the end, I will go on to talk about the governance and management in the context of NEP 2020. Now, one of the things that I will do is I will go on till around 6 o'clock or 6:10 to talk about the on the presentation, and then I will look forward to some question answers and some interaction with all of you. So the outline of the presentation is like this: that the growth in pre-independence and post-independence India, the higher education context in India, challenges of India's higher education leadership and governance, and new regulatory and policy developments in NEP 2020. So that is how I've outlined the presentation. That I'll talk about the past because that has a lot of implications about for what is going to happen, what is happening presently, and what will happen in the future. So in that sense, it's very important. Then the higher education context. That is, what is a higher education data, what is the GR, and what is the graduation subjects, that disciplines, orientation, and things like that. And then the challenges of India's higher education leadership and governance, and ending with the new regulatory and policy developments in National Education Policy 2020. So the growth in pre-independence and post-independence India. Until the 18th century BC, India had three traditions of advanced scholarship. We had the Gurukuls, the Hindu Gurukuls, the Buddhist Viharas, and the Quranic madrasas. So British colonial regime laid the foundation of modern higher education in the 19th century. And in fact, the first college to impart Western education was founded in Sirampur near Calcutta in 1818. And colleges were also established in Agra, Bombay, Madras, Nagpur, Patna, Calcutta, and Nagapattinam over the next 40 years. First three universities were established at Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras in 1857. And at the time of independence in 1947, there were 25 universities and several hundred affiliated colleges. So post-independence growth of higher education has been in two spurts, before 1980 and after 1980. We can look at like that. So so that is the kind of background to what has been the growth in pre-independence and post-independence India. Now, higher education context. India has the second largest higher education system in the world, and we have moved from a stage of elitism to a stage of massification. In the words of what Martin Trow has said, that and in fact, since it was mentioned by Professor Anugama in the beginning, that I have co-edited a book with Professor Henry Verghese, who I think has a session with you tomorrow on skill development. Um, he has written a paper on massification, which I'll highlight in the references towards the end, and then another paper on universalization to massification, which is a paper 16 in the art research paper series. So paper one and paper 16 kind of closes the loop. So in that sense, so when we say elitism, why do we say elitism? Well, at the time of independence, it was people from very elite families coming for higher education, and that had a lot of implications for governance and management. So we moved from a stage of elitism to a stage of massification. Now we have students coming from diverse backgrounds, and I think your next session is on student diversity and inclusion. So I think it'll tie up very well that it is about elitism to massification. So large and growing role of the private sector. Private sector is growing in terms of private universities and private colleges, and diversification in courses, mode of delivery, and providers. So there is diversification in the kind of courses and the mode of delivery, and also providers. So expansion and massification, the GR is now 28.4. So, you have the like I said, diversification in courses, mode of delivery. Well, just like you see us in the NEP orientation sensitization program, this is an fully online program. So its mode of delivery is face to face and online. And providers, well, it's both public and private. So growth of the private sector, public expenditure has not kept pace with the expansion. So, the expenditure on higher education has to increase in order to keep up with the expansion that is taking place. And demand and supply mismatch, we need more universities. So governing and managing such a large and diversified system becomes very complex. And so, that is one of the things that, it is no longer a small system. It is a very large system. It's a very diversified system. So it's the second largest higher education system in the world. And we have 1168 universities, 45,000 colleges, 12,000 standalone institutions, large role of the private sector. We have 473 privately managed universities, and 78.5% colleges are in the private sector. It counts for 65.2% of the total enrollment. And there has been a stage of massification. 43.3 million students with a GR of 28.4. That is the current data according to the All India Survey of Higher Education. So that is, the latest data that is out there. So the context is that governance and management, and that is my area of research and area of focus, is becoming very complex against the backdrop of the expansion and diversification taking place not only in India but globally. So, governance of higher education institutions is essential to fulfilling the sustainable development goal of quality education. And the proposals of reforming educational governance through restructuring existing structures or creating new structures of governance recommended under the National Education Policy 2020 can play a very important role in improving the functioning of the higher education system. And now, what are the principles of good governance? I mean, of course, that's also a loaded term. That what do we mean by good governance? Should it come from the institution itself, or should we put a World Bank term of what is good governance about? So, based on the principles of efficiency, effectiveness, transparency, autonomy, and accountability, the higher education system in India is envisaged to move towards an output and outcome based model. There is also a move to strengthen higher education institutions, and all efforts are being made to develop robust institutions by strong governance and effective leadership. Often observed that, I mean, it is often said that India has an over-regulated and under-governed higher education system. So the government is taking several initiatives for NEP 2020 implementation, overhauling the large higher education system and into its structural reorganization into an ecosystem of large multidisciplinary universities and colleges. And NEP proposes to have only three types of higher education institutions: research intensive universities, teaching intensive universities, and autonomous degree granting colleges. So that is what the context is. So, and NEP 2020 says that we should have light but tight regulation. So enrollment by management type. So you have private and government colleges. So you have the private unaided, private aided, total private, and government colleges. And the enrollment in colleges is mostly, if you take the private aided and unaided together, then it's almost, total private is almost 66% and government is 35%. But if you take government and private aided, then it's roughly half and half. So I'm just trying to show you that, in terms of the colleges also, I mean, it's roughly half and half private and government. In fact, private colleges dominate. And this is according to the Aisha estimates. The other thing is the top 10 most popular programs. The top 10 most popular programs are Bachelors of Arts, Bachelors of Science, Bachelors of Commerce, Bachelor of Technology, and so on. So Bachelor of Arts is the most popular program in India according to the data on the number of students enrolled. Now, this is how the figures look like. That the figure of humanities and arts, that the maximum students undergraduate are enrolled in humanities and arts. So there is a need to push for the science and the STEM subjects. And I think that it's very important, and it's also important to understand that it is not about STEM as in humanities and arts or sciences, but this NEP 2020 talks about having a multidisciplinary approach. So you have a multidisciplinary approach to higher education, and that is what is the policy all about? So the postgraduate student enrollment is in humanities, is not in humanities and arts, but it is falling closely to business administration and law, and also social sciences, journalism, and information. But it's not so much in the sciences. So there is a need to improve the student enrollment in the sciences and in technology if India has to compete with universities and with uh, Indian universities have to compete globally. So I think that's it's very, very important. Now, enrollment by social groups, just to understand the kind of, when we say massification, and we have now students coming from different social backgrounds, and they are coming from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, other backward classes, and also from communities. So therefore, there is a need to increase the enrollment. While other backward classes, the enrollment has been increasing. Scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, especially, is not increased at that pace. So there is a need to increase education for students from tribal backgrounds, and that is very, very, very important. So that is as far as the enrollment and of different social groups is concerned. Now, if we see the gross enrollment ratios, and you can see that for different states, and we have Maharashtra since I'm addressing Ayuka Pune. I mean, for Maharashtra, it is 34.9. So it is higher than the national average. And the same is for Tamil Nadu, the same for Telangana, the same for many other states. But then for states like some state, like let me just pick up Bihar or other states, there the enrollment is lesser than the national average. So the national average is just it's an average, obviously, but it does not tell the full picture of the what is happening at the state level. That is very important. This is actually the data from the year before. That's why it's 27.3. Otherwise, it's right now 28.4. But for the states, it is given. This is given the state-wise picture. So many states are above the national average, and many states are below the national average. Now, as far as the union state shares and funding is concerned, and this has implications for governance, because NEP, I mean, education is a concurrent subject. So we have the states and the trends in union state shares in funding higher education. The states giving much more funding than what is coming from the center. So that is another thing, that the central universities are very well funded. But when it comes to the state universities, there is a need to improve the funding of the state universities. And this is, of course, the distance mode, just to also show you that as demand for higher education has surpassed institutional capacities, distance education has also emerged as an alternative. And it was established and placed by the Distance Education Bureau, which is now attached to the University Grants Commission. So that is what it is. Now, coming to the operational definitions of governance and leadership. So I've given you the bigger picture and the higher education context in India. Now we are coming to governance and leadership. So what do we mean by governance? I mean, what does governance mean to you? Governance refers to the structure and processes of decision making. Governance becomes effective and improves institutional performance when decisions are translated into operational practices accompanied by accountability measures at the institutional level. So, when we say good governance, it underlies the qualitative dimension of governance, indicating effective, efficient, participative forms of government responsible for transparent and accountable management of resources. Now, leadership has many definitions. And while some define leadership as a group process, others define it as an influence process. Many see leadership as the instrument for achievement of a goal. In the realm of higher education, leadership and management are considered highly contested terms. A vice chancellor of a university is an academic leader who upholds and maintains social responsibility, formal rationality, and procedural legitimacy. Now, leadership and management are the concepts that are grounded in a local context. And to better understand these, one has to look at how these two function in a given political, social, economic, and cultural milieu. So, Governance refers to the structures and process of decision making. Like when we say structures, you have in a university, you have the academic council, you have the senate, you have the board of studies, the board of management. In some like PHU, they have the court also, the university court. So, and then of course all these structures get together, and then that is how decisions are made. But it becomes effective and improves performance when the decisions are translated into operational practices, accompanied by accountability measures at the institutional level. So that is why we talk about good governance. Of course, this is a World Bank term, and not everyone would agree with that. But the thing is that it is good governance could either be coming from the institutional experience, that this is the way a university should be governed, or we can have certain preconceived notions about what is good governance and what are the qualitative dimensions of good governance. So the context of governance and leadership in MEP 2020, as the Indian economy has become more globalized and also more knowledge based, the skill mix in the economy has changed drastically. These shifts in the job market have changed what we need from our higher education system. The major issue is how to raise the quality and standards of Indian higher education and make it globally competitive while being locally relevant. So, in this context, governance and leadership of higher education institutions needs major revamping in order to compete with the best universities globally. So, reforming the system of governance and leadership of higher education is one of the most important parts of the transformative agenda of the NEP 2020. The policy envisions reforms in governance as a requisite of achieving the targets and goals of education in coming years. So, the governance reforms agenda consists of a number of proposals of structuring and restructuring of governance structures. And here I'm quoting directly from the NEP 2020, which says that it is effective governance and leadership that enables the creation of a culture of excellence and innovation in higher education institutions. A common feature of all world class institutions globally, including India, has indeed been the existence of strong self governance and outstanding merit based appointments of institution leaders. So, when we say governance and leadership, when we say how does it become more effective, it enables when it is creates a culture of excellence and innovation. And a common feature of all world class institutions has been the existence of self governance and merit based appointments of institutional leaders. That's very important. So, now, how is governance and leadership in a higher education institution different from, say, a large enterprise? So, higher education institutions have always been perceived as very collegial governance organizations governed and managed by a community of scholars. However, in this past decades, this very idea of a university has come under threat due to the growing new modes of managerialism. And I'll be talking about that in a lot of detail, but some defend this change as being necessary due to the wave of globalization, as well as the need for greater accountability to governing boards and internal and external stakeholders. So, higher education institutions are increasingly becoming difficult places to govern, manage, and lead due to the growing contestations on campus and ideological divides. Industry, civil society, community, and government interests frequently diverge, and middle paths have to be carved out. Furthermore, they operate in a volatile environment and need to embrace change and adapt to emerging trends and dynamics. Higher education institutions don't function as a large corporation would, and thus higher education leadership has been to be trained differently without the management and leadership theories that would befit a CEO in a large enterprise. So, academic leadership or effective academic leadership in higher education is a function of several factors or characteristics. These include leadership in teaching, leadership in research, strategic vision and networking, collaborative and motivational leadership, fair and efficient management, and the development and recognition of performance and interpersonal skills, according to Ramsden 1998, who has written a lot on this subject. So, leadership in higher education institutions. So there have been increasing challenges of leading higher education institutions, and especially recently, as you have seen in many universities, there have been student protests and ghaus and things like that. So, what is it that makes a leadership really truly worthwhile? So, in the wake of changes in the role of educational leaders and organizational practices and the volatility, this calls for revisiting the leadership strategies at the union, state, and institutional level. And the NEP 2020 has flagged the theme of leadership as central to bring about the desired changes in higher education, needing to build performance culture with institutional development along with creativity and innovation under the leadership of a visionary leader. All these can be achieved with institutional arrangements for leadership development at the national level with scholars from top international institutions of higher learning across the globe. But it is felt, and Pankaj Chandra has talked a lot about it. He used to be the director of IIM Bangalore, and now he's heading university as a vice chancellor. And it is increasingly felt that in Indian academia, there is a lack of strong leadership. Unlike during the post independence period, when visionaries and leaders built universities, and I've also written about this in my paper, which I will cite at the end in the references. There is a tendency of flight of good academics to North America and Europe due to the strong pull factors in terms of better research prospects and higher global visibility. Moreover, many universities in India are headless or have not had vice chancellors for years together due to interference in appointments and lack of consensus. So, Chandra 2012 highlights the leadership challenges faced by vice chancellors who struggle to run the university on a day to day basis. Also, any changes in the structure require changes in the university acts, which require the approval of state or central legislature. So, the crisis of leadership also affects the appointment of members of the governing bodies, deans, heads of department, and principals of colleges. Especially in state universities, there are many instances of interference and nepotism. For the many a time, members of the civil service are appointed instead of academicians, which is fair enough, but there should be a preference given to academicians. Sudhanshu Bhushan, who is also a professor at NIPA, 2016, discusses how impartiality can be invoked in the selection process of vice chancellors and examines the difference between selection process in India and abroad. So NEP 2020, what are the expectations from institutional leaders? So we have a document in which we have talked about a document in NEPA, which basically talks about the uh, implementation of the NEP 2020, not just NEP 2020, which is, of course, the policy document, but the implementation of the NEP 2020. And in that there are some things I've taken from that document, which is the expectations from institutional leaders. So all leadership positions and heads of institutions will be offered to persons with high academic qualifications and demonstrated administrative and leadership capabilities. And leaders will demonstrate strong alignment to constitutional values and the overall vision of the institution, along with attributes such as strong social commitment, belief in teamwork, pluralism, ability to work with diverse people. I think that's very important. I think we'll just spend a few minutes on this, that it is very important because we now have a very diverse student body. It is no longer a body that is just, very homogeneous in nature. It is quite heterogeneous. We have students from difficult socio-economic backgrounds, and we also have students from other social backgrounds, and we also have students who are first generation learners. So I think there it is very important to have the ability to work with diverse groups and a positive outlook. So the selection should be carried out by the Board of Governors through a rigorous, impartial, merit-based, and competency-based process led by an eminent expert committee constituted by the BOG. Leadership succession will be planned with care to ensure that good practices that define an institution's process do not end due to a change in leadership. Leadership changes will come with sufficient overlaps and not remain vacant in order to ensure smooth transitions. Outstanding leaders will be identified and developed early. There are programs like the LEAP program, which try to identify vice chancellors early when they are deans or they are, heads, but not yet become vice chancellors, and groom them further and send them for programs to in India and outside, outside through a ladder of leadership, working their way through a ladder of leadership positions. So, roles of leadership in promoting academic excellence and administrative efficiency. Most of the research on leadership in higher education has focused on the holders of formal academic roles, such as vice chancellors, principals, pro vice chancellors, deans, heads of department. And if you see the literature, then Breakwell and Tytherley, 2008, studied the leadership of VCs in UK universities, identifying the characteristics, that is academic credibility, financial awareness, adaptability, confidence, strong persona, sense of mission, strategy, and or vision. There is, however, a tension between academic leadership, which is about the leadership of academic institutions rather than leadership by of academic work. So, administrative leadership, which includes all leadership roles and responsibilities existing within HEIs that are not explicitly related to leading the academic core. So, decisions about the creation, implementation, and improvement of the curriculum fall to academic leadership. Other decisions which are built outside strictly academic matters rest with administrative leadership. Moreover, academic communities, both student and faculty, are more diverse than ever, coming from various socio-economic backgrounds. Thus, academic leaders and administrators need to enable and endorse a wider community interaction. That's very, very important. So, in terms of the academic leadership and administrative leadership, yes, a vice chancellor of a university has to demonstrate both academic as well as administrative leadership, and it's very rare, but it's very important to find that critical combination of both academic and administrative human. So strategies for institutional leaders at HEIs, they need to be academic leadership centers established for training the current vice chancellors, registrars, as well as the potential vice chancellors and registrars, and any other positions of leadership which focus on the following areas. These are some of the areas which were identified, which are recent reform initiatives in higher education, widening access, equity, and diversity in higher education, quality in higher education accreditation and ranking, improving teaching, learning, and technology in higher education, enhancing learning outcomes and employability, financing options and strategies for resource mobilization, managing autonomy and accountability in higher education, developing research capacity in higher education, internationalization and globalization of higher education, and leadership, strategic planning, and management. So, the potential vice chancellors and registrars may be selected on strict selection criteria, trained at both Indian and foreign collaborating universities, infusing the performance culture among the leading research universities, and set benchmarks for Indian institutions to follow. And what is the leadership training? What are the objectives? Provide orientation to senior academic colleagues for visionary leadership and strategic planning and sectoral understanding, to enable senior academic colleagues to lead the academic as well as administrative teams' diverse workforce through positive work culture, to facilitate senior academic colleagues to competently deal with leadership challenges, to bring in performance culture and efficiency in institutions in India, to facilitate innovation and creativity in research, teaching, and learning, and overall effectiveness of the institutions, to explore technology for both deeper engagement and wider delivery. So, there are existing leadership initiatives also in two components of the flagship scheme, Pandit Madan Mohan, that is the earlier version of this Malviya mission, National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, that is the Center of Academic Leadership and Education Management, CALM, and the LEAP program, that is the Leadership for Academic. So, we know leaders are born, but it's also there is a need to groom senior faculty for leadership positions. These could be strengthened further and also evaluated to assess how effective they have been in training leaders for the next level. That is, I think, very, very important. So expectations and institutional autonomy, when we talk about autonomy, and I'll talk a lot about autonomy because, that's one of the tenets of higher education governance. While being provided with adequate funding, legislative enablement, and autonomy, higher education institutions will display commitment to institutional excellence, engagement with their local communities, and the highest standards of financial probity and accountability. Each institution will make a strategic institutional development plan, which I think everyone is already in the process of making an IDP, on the basis of which institutions will develop initiatives, assess their own progress, and reach the goals set therein, which could then become the basis for further public funding. The IDP shall be prepared with the joint participation of board members, institutional leaders, faculty, students, and staff. So there's a need to involve everyone. It's not just about restricting it to the leaders, but board members, institutional leaders, faculty, students, and staff. So strategies to move towards institutional autonomy, institutional development plans, and perspective plans should be prepared to strategize on a vision for 2035. And I'll just give you an example that, we had a perspective plan for NEPA prepared by our former Vice Chancellor, Professor Henry Burgess. It was basically a perspective plan, which are the areas that NEPA will focus on, what is the roadmap, what is the strategic vision. So, as part of these plans, institutional leaders should identify key areas of research focus and also strategies to achieve teaching excellence. Now, best practices must be studied in higher education institutions globally and in India. And faculty governance should be encouraged so that they also have a say in matters of running the institution. And particularly junior faculty should be involved in academic council, senate, and boards of management. Departments should be strengthened and regular departmental meetings should be held. So, these are some of the strategies to move towards more institutional autonomy and also to have a more strategic vision. Otherwise, we have day to day management and, day to day running of the institution. But it is about having a perspective plan that, what is the vision on 2035 and then how you, uh, work towards that vision and that have that, foresight. So expectations from governing bodies and institutional leaders. Over a period of 15 years, all higher education institutions will aim to become independent, self-governing institutions, pursuing innovation and excellence. So, it's very important to have self-governance. And measures will be taken at all higher education institutions to ensure leadership of the highest quality and promote an institutional culture of excellence. So, upon receiving the graded accreditation, a board of governors shall be established consisting of a group of highly qualified, competent, and dedicated individuals having proven capabilities. And they will be empowered to govern the institution free of any external interference, make all appointments, including that of head of the institution, and take all decisions regarding governance. So, this is something which we have in the IITs, but it is just that NIMs, but we have to have it for all the universities also, central, state, deemed, and also recommend for private universities because NEP 2020 does not make a distinction between public and private. In the sense that it says that all these regulations should apply to uh, everyone. So strategies for governing bodies at higher education institutions. New members of the board should be identified by an expert committee appointed by the board. Equity considerations should be taken off while selecting the members. So they should be, gender balance. There should be socioeconomic backgrounds which should be taken into account. All higher education institutions should aim to become autonomous, self-regulating entities and have such an empowered BOG by 2035. Both should have a balance of distinguished members from the academic community, industry, and alumni. The size of the board should not become unwieldy. So, you shouldn't have like very big boards, but 10 to 15 members should be appropriate. Best practices, like I just said, of IITs and IIMs may be studied closely, who have had independent governing boards. And that is one of the reasons, for their performance and also their autonomy, which they assert that, they have independent governing boards. So I think it's very important, for central and state universities, and also, of course, deemed universities and to some extent, private universities as well, to have these independent governing boards. So now coming to the role of the state, and I'm talking about the role of the state and market, higher education. So I've talked a lot about leadership and what leadership should do in the context of NEP 2020 and what are the recommendations and things. Now, role of the state. Higher education is an exclusive domain of the public sector at the start of the planning period. Fiscal constraints in the 1980s led to public institutions diversifying sources of funding. Public funding since has become very targeted, much more targeted. And higher education institutions have become more autonomous in setting priorities and mobilizing resources. And notions of efficiency in operation, performance evaluation, and accountability measures. So that is very very important. That if you see the Clark's triangle of coordination, you have the state, market, and higher education institutions. So to what extent do we want the market to come in, and to what extent do we want the state to withdraw? Because if you see, and I'm not trying to say, but I mean the data and the it shows that most university, I mean most countries which have had very advanced higher education systems and very well functioning higher education system have also had a very strong public funded higher education system. So that is very important. So while we allow the market to come in and we allow private universities and we allow self financing courses and private elements of it is very important to have uh, the state funding, and core funding should come from the government. I think that's very very important. So new public management, just to talk about the new changes in governance, that is, it's not very new, but it's just that it is relatively newer than the collegial governance, because new public management, state supervision. I mean, for India, it is something which is coming in, but it has been there in Europe and in North America for some time. So, new public management, state supervision, the evaluative state, replacing the traditional focus on state control and academic collegial governance. Now, state control giving way to more institutional management, role of governments evolving into incentives and sanctions, and government steering from a distance. So, it is this emergence of new public management, and which is very important. Now, the main principles of new public management are emphasizing economy, efficiency, effectiveness, by downplaying the importance of regulation. So, NPM does not talk so much about regulation and control. It talks more about the uh, private elements coming into public universities. So, it's not that it means privatization, but it's just that there are new aspects of managerialism which come into the universities. So, you have the uh, reorganizing the bureaucracy into different agencies, increasing competition through the introduction of quasi market systems and contract systems, and expenses reduce and facilitate income growth, shift to greater competition in public sectors, emphasizing more on private sector styles of management. So, managerialism means the role of the administrator transforms into a manager, increasing the flexibility and mobility of organization structure, personnel, and working conditions. So, this is basically about how to make public universities, and public sector more efficient. And that is how NPM came about. Not that everyone agrees with NPM. It's also there is a whole literature out there that NPM has not worked and it has it will never work. So greater emphasis on consumerism. To NPM, citizens are considered as consumers. Secure participation of people through the decentralization process. And in fact, people have experimented with new public management in Europe and North America, and somewhat some systems have actually rejected it. But it's just that the principle is about making public institutions more akin to private institutions in terms of their style of functioning and things like that. So this is the internal governance, which I showed you before. Uh, Clark model was of external governance. That how much should the state control, and should it move to state supervision instead of state control? Now, this is the flexible shared governance model of Lapworth, which is the internal governance that when the faculty, the management, the board, senate, and he also talked about a steering code. How do they interact with each other? So that is another thing. Now, challenges of India's higher education governance. What are the different challenges of India's higher education governance over the years? So, one of the terminology that the NEP 2020 has used is a fragmented ecosystem of higher education. The word is fragmented, and more support needed for professional development, interference in leadership appointments, need for a push for quality, faculty shortages. We have serious faculty shortages, more industry academic collaboration needed, lack of institutional autonomy, particularly for state universities, affiliating structure, affiliating colleges to universities. These are some of the challenges of higher education governance. So, governance of higher education institutions, some of the key issues: how much freedom institutions have to run their own affairs, the extent to which they rely on government funding or can draw from other sources, the changing ways in which the higher education system itself is being subject to quality assurance and control in the context of new public management, the strengthening of the governance of the institutions, and new roles for leaders. So that's another thing. Now, level-wise teaching staff in university teaching departments and its constituent units, we have a lot of recruitment, but I mean, we don't have a lot of recruitment. And even if it is there, it is more at the level of assistant professors. So there is a need to have more of, senior level faculty to lead the institutions. And while there should be assistant professors, it should not be like what the situation is right now. So, there should be timely promotion and timely recruitment also. In many institutions, recruitment hasn't happened for a decade or so. So that's another thing. Now, parameters of good governance. I've touched on this before also, and this is given by World Bank, but it is just that it is something which is very important. So I'm talking about it again. So participation, transparency, responsiveness, consensus orientation, effectiveness and efficiency, autonomy, accountability, and strategic vision. So, you have all these things. If you want good governance, then all these aspects should be, present. There should be participation of faculty and in all decision making. There should be transparency. There should be transparency in decision making. There should be responsiveness. There should be consensus orientation. Everyone should be taken along. Should be democratic, participative governance, effectiveness and efficiency, autonomy, accountability, strategic vision. I'll give you an example that when we in NEPA, when we had we recently launched the Masters in Education and Development last year. Before that, we just had MPhil and PhD, but MPhil under the new education policy is discontinued. So, any case, we had launched a master's program. So, under the previous Vice Chancellor, Professor Varghese, I mean, everybody, each and every faculty was involved in developing the curriculum. So, in the curriculum committee, and we had successive meetings and everything. Now, the master's program is in the second year. It was rolled out last year, and this is the second year of its functioning. So, it is about the participation, democratic participation. So that is one of the things. And these are just some of the governance processes, strategy, controls, accountability, performance, and evolution of national policy on education since independence. This national policy in 2020 is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. But before this, we also had other policies in 1968 calling for a radical restructuring and equalizing education opportunities to achieve greater cultural and economic development. Then the policy in 86, which expanded the open university system with IGNOU, which had been created in 1985. Policy also called for the creation of the rural university model to promote social, economic, and social development at the grassroots level in rural India. The 1986 National Policy on Education was modified in 1992 as Program of Action and envisaged conduct of a common entrance exam on all India basis for admission to professional technical programs in the country. NEP 2020 is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and is based on the foundational pillars of access, affordability, equity, quality, and accountability. So what I'm trying to say is that, NEP 2020, everything is not new. Some of the things were there before also, but this is a bit of completing the unfinished agenda. But there are some very new aspects also in NEP 2020, which have to be treated. So in terms of the regulatory framework, we have the Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education at the state level, Niti Aayog, Central Advisory Board of Education, State Councils of Higher Education. Then we have the University Grants Commission, Department of Collegiate Education at the state level, all the different councils. So we have policy making, we have regulation, and we have accreditation. So they all function concomitantly or together with each other. So some of the committees and commissions which have been there on governance in India, where it started from the Radhakrishnan Commission 1948, and then coming to the Kothari Commission 1964-66, which talked a lot about mentoring also, that institutions should be mentored. Rajendra Gadkar Committee 1969, UGC Guidelines on Autonomous Colleges 1973-78, and National Policy on Education 1986, and then subsequent many guidelines on schemes of autonomous colleges, and the CAPE Committee, Yashpal Committee, which talked about a single regulator, which now we are discussing in a lot of detail. So, main players in the higher education system in India, UGC. The UGC came into existence in 1953, and in the formative years, it was modeled on the University Grants Committee in the United Kingdom. And the decade of 1963-73 saw the UGC grow from primarily a grants giving to a policy-making organization. But while it has become a policy-making body, it has not always been able to shape and implement policy. So, that's very important. And now we are talking about clipping some of the powers and, giving it to the Grants Council. So, in terms of the financing and in the NEP 2020, these are some of the professional councils. This is just the NEP, NAC, when it was established, and what it talks about institutional program accreditation. So this is about EQA, external quality assurance, and internal quality assurance. So the National Assessment and Accreditation Council has many dimensions along which institutions are assessed. And while the process was voluntary earlier, now UGC funding is linked to accreditation. Some of the dimensions of assessment of universities is that of governance, leadership, and management. And key aspects like institutional vision and leadership, strategy development and deployment, faculty empowerment strategies, financial management and resource mobilization, and IQA, internal quality assurance system. However, it is actually true that a fraction of higher education institutions has been accredited in India. I think the figure is around 20%. It's not a straightforward act to introduce and implement accountability measures. This is governance of autonomous colleges. We have a large number of affiliated and also autonomous colleges. So, the governance was to have structures like the governing body, academic council, board of studies, finance committee in autonomous colleges. So, building stronger universities should be autonomous, they should be proactive, entrepreneurial, and accountable. Increase the decision powers of the leaders while securing the necessary consultations and control. Professionalizing the decision mechanisms and the administration. And significant governance trend is, like I said, I'll talk a lot about autonomy, is the widening of institutional autonomy. So, block grants, strategic plans, academic freedom, and independent governing body are all indications of institutional autonomy. However, while we say autonomy, it should not be used as a way to remove or withdraw public funding. So, granting of autonomy should be accompanied by core funding while maintaining the freedom of institutions to mobilize additional funds. And autonomy should be accompanied by capacity development efforts at the institutional level. That's very important. So dimensions of autonomy, there is academic autonomy, which is deciding on the study programs, curriculum, and methods of teaching and research. Financial autonomy, authority to take decisions on mobilization, allocation of funds, level of tuition fee to be levied from students and income generating activities. Organizational autonomy, authority to set university structures and statutes, making contracts, electing decision making bodies and persons. Administrative autonomy or staffing autonomy, responsibility for staff recruitment, salaries, and promotions. Now, accountability includes moving towards more output and outcome based measures from being input based. I'll give you an example. Like, when you say input based is basically the enrollment, but outcome based is like the number of people, students who are graduating. So, if you have a large number of dropout rates, then there's no point looking only at enrollment. We have to also look at the number of students who are graduating. So, accountability includes moving towards more output and outcome based measures from being input based. Accountability is meaningful only when higher education institutions are empowered to operate in an autonomous way. Performance evaluation, performance based contracts, performance based funding, competitive funding, EQA, IQA are all accountability measures. So, now coming to the last part of the presentation, which talks about the NEP 2020. The NEP 2020 classifies higher education institutions into research intensive universities along with teaching activities and teaching intensive universities along with some research activities. And it also proposes to integrate so that there is creation and creativity and innovation, critical thinking, higher order thinking capacities, problem solving abilities, that humanities and arts, which I showed you in the beginning, that the maximum enrollment is actually in humanities and arts, should be integrated with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And now, of course, it's called STEAM, which is arts also, to integrate in undergraduate education. And as research shows and as noted in NEP, such a holistic approach is bound to enhance creativity and innovation, creative thinking, and higher order thinking capacities, problem solving abilities. The goal of National Research Foundation is to competitively fund research in diverse fields of study to spread the culture of research across the universities. NRF will ensure that the research funding is done through a merit-based and transparent peer review process so that outstanding and major research innovation initiatives with close collaboration with governmental, industrial, and philanthropic organizations are recognized. So these are some of the features of NEP 2020: institutional consolidation and restructuring, restructuring of degree programs, autonomy to faculty and institutional autonomy, emphasis on research, and governance of higher education institutions, light but tight regulation. Now, consolidation of higher education institutions, that figure should be dated, but it's more than 1,000 universities and 45,000 colleges and others into about 15,000 large, well-resourced, vibrant, multidisciplinary institutions. So when you have universities with a focus on research and teaching, and you have autonomous degree granting colleges, automatically the governance will be different for those higher education institutions. So the new regulatory structure, the functioning of all the independent verticals for regulation, NHERC, accreditation, NAC, funding HEGC and academic standards setting GEC, the overarching autonomous umbrella body HECI will be based on public disclosure and use technology to reduce human interface to ensure efficiency and transparency. So the first vertical of HECI will be the NHERC. It will function as the common single point regulator for the higher education sector, including teacher education, excluding medical and legal education, thus eliminating the disjunction and duplication of regulatory efforts by multiple regulatory agencies. This, in fact, was one of the recommendations of the Yashpal committee, way back in 2009 also. And many commissions and committees have talked about this. The second vertical of HECI will be NAC, not NAC, but NAC. So accreditation will be based primarily on basic norms, public self-disclosure, good governance, and outcomes, carried out by an independent ecosystem of accrediting institutions overseen by NAC. The third vertical will be the Higher Education Grants Council. So instead of, like what we have right now, the UGC taking care of funding, it will carry out funding and financing of higher education based on transparent criteria, including the IDPs prepared and the progress made in their implementation. The fourth vertical of HECI will be the General Education Council, which will frame expected learning outcomes for higher education programs, also referred to as graduate attributes. And then we have the professional councils, such as the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, National Council for Teacher Education, Council for Architecture, and so on, which are all going to be professional standard setting bodies. So, and this I've already talked about, so I will not go over it again. But effective governance and leadership is all about self-governance, good self-governance, and free of any external interference. Make all appointments, including that of head of the institutions, and take all decisions regarding governance. So these are some snapshots of actually taken from the NEP 2020. That you have motivated, energized, and capable faculty. The most important factor is the success is the quality and engagement of its faculty, acknowledging the criticality of faculty, and equipping with the basic infrastructure and facilities. Teaching duties should not be excessive. Student-teacher ratios should not be too high, so that the activity of teaching is not hampered in any way. Faculty will be also recruited through merit-based appointments, and tenure track. The suitable probation period should be put in place to ensure excellence. So there should be a fast-track promotion system for organizing high-impact research and contribution. So effective, this I've already talked about. So I just wanted to show you the exact place it is placed in NEP 2020 on governance and leadership. And graded autonomy. The NIRF, adopted by the ministry, ranks all institutions of higher education in India using parameters for ranking such as resources, research, stakeholder perception, and only top ranking institutions will be exempt from the UGC's review mechanism. Otherwise, with a score of at least 3.5 or ranked in the top 50 institutions, will be under the category 1. Universities under this category will be free to start a new course, develop department and school without UGC approval. And then you have the category 2, if they are between the score of 3.01 and 3.49, ranked between 51 and 100. Finally, institutions categorized as category 3 will be the most regulated universities. They will not enjoy any of the exemptions granted to those in category 1 and category 2. So coming to the last part of the presentation, which is future priorities. And this is the NEP 2020 envisages gross enrollment ratio will be raised to a planned 50%. That will be right now at massification. It is to go towards universalization, like all advanced countries. And higher education qualifications in terms of learning outcomes shall be described by the National Higher Education Qualification Framework. The General Education Council will create the National Higher Education Qualification Framework and will be coordinated with the National Skill Qualification Framework, setting up national norms for credit transfers and study equivalencies to facilitate student transfer and recognition of prior learning. That's one of the things that I studied in the project which Professor Arun Goswami had mentioned in my introduction about the recognition of prior learning, flexible learning pathways, and NHEQF shall allow flexibility, a system of credit transfer with flexible entry, exit, transfers across institutions and programs. The emphasis will be placed on ensuring lifelong learning opportunities by enabling and strengthening various pathways. Now, these are some of the publications that we have in our center. And I just want to highlight because, I have worked on 2 publications which were highlighted by Professor Anand Goswami in my introduction. with Professor N.V. Verghese, who's our former Vice Chancellor. So Indian Higher Education Report 2015, published by Routledge in 2016. Governance and Management of Higher Education in India, which was published by SAGE. And now again, we move back to Routledge. So, we have the India Higher Education Report 2021, Private Higher Education, a whole volume on private higher education, and then another volume on women in higher education. So, I've talked a lot about equity and diversity and also about the, gender balance in leadership positions. So it's this whole volume is on women in higher education. We have several research papers and of course several other publications. So in terms of the references, these are some of the references that I've used to prepare this presentation. My own paper on governance and management of higher education institutions in India. Now I have a more recent paper which has come out on governance and management of higher education institutions in India, an empirical analysis where I've actually done empirical analysis of four universities, one central university and three state university and the affiliated and autonomous colleges. Then the other references on EPW and Paul Ramsden, Rehana Raza, Martin Troe, reflection on the transition from elite to mass to universal access. Professor Verghes's paper on massification, paper one. Then a paper that we have written jointly in the University News Journal, Institutional Autonomy and Higher Education India. And then the references on leadership by Professor Sudhanshu Bhushan, who is a professor in Department of Higher Education, NEPA. He then Bekul and Taidale, then several other references which are there. Pankaj Chandra's book, Mimeo, and then a book also which talks about governance in higher education. And so all these references are there, and I think they will be very useful to you in case you are interested to read further. Then there's also Governance and Management of Universities in Asia, a book which was by Routledge on global influences and local responses. And there we had a chapter on institutional autonomy and governance of higher education institutions in India in a book on Asia. And then Paul Ramsden's book on managing the effective university and so on. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't overshoot the time. And I'll stop sharing here. And I'd be happy to take on any questions or any interaction.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Professor Malik. That was a great overview starting on this topic of academic leadership, governance, and so on. So the participants can unmute themselves and ask questions now. I can see there are a couple of questions in the chat already.
Yeah, I would like to ask one question.
Sure.
Sure.
This is Vipul Kakkad from Central University of Rajasthan. So I would like to ask a question. What is her personal view on the private player coming in higher education? Because we understand that there are some bureaucratic problem in the government institution. We daily see that kind of thing in our institution. I am an example of that, suffering from the bureaucracy in Rajasthan. But even then, I will not support that private player coming in the higher education, because there are we are kind of the bureaucracy, the different kind of bureaucracy is there. And there was some Clark triangle, but I'm not expert in economics because I'm a student in mathematics. So, but I heard of one theory in economics which is called as the percolation, that everything should be given to the corporate sector, and the thing should percolate from top to down. So, what is her view on the whether the private sector should come in higher education or not?
Okay. So Dr. Kakkar, a very good question. And I think that, you've raised a very important point about the private players. And I think my personal, my view on this is that I think higher education should be publicly funded, and there should be public institutions to the greatest extent possible. We cannot avoid having a few institutions, but they should not, kind of change the landscape, because I think that leads to a lot of disciplinary distortions. if you have a lot of institutions which are like right now, technical or engineering or medical colleges, but they are not functioning in a very efficient way. I mean, you have, colleges or even to that extent universities, which are well within the ambit of regulation, but they are flouting regulations all the time. So I think that's very important to, not. I mean, I'm not against privatization or private universities, but I think that it's important to also regulate them well. If they are well regulated, if you have a good system, like I said, I mean, the state should not be controlling, but the state should be supervising. So state, as in when we talk about the government, and the market can come in, but market should not come into that extent that you have the private players taking over, and because that has a lot of implications for efficiency, equity, and also in terms of the students coming from first generation learners and socioeconomic backgrounds, because they are also causing the fees to go up. So the fees is going up, and and because the private university that's obviously charging exorbitant fees, so that becomes very difficult for certain students coming from difficult backgrounds. So I think that that is another point, that they don't always give enough scholarships or free ships, and that becomes another equity issue. So I think in that respect, it is very difficult to have the I mean, there is a need for regulation. Like, in NEP 2020, because the policy document itself is 60 pages, the draft document was much longer. But, it doesn't distinguish between public and private in the context of regulation. So that means that everyone should come under the ambit of regulation. And when you are talking about regulation, you can have a single point regulator, you can have, but they should be accredited, and accredited not for, advertising, but accredited in the spirit of being, knowing that what they have, and getting the, ranking only if they are, fit to run a university, because so many universities have been closed down, so many universities which are not functioning properly and everything. So I think it's very important to have that, because I mean, I personally feel that, publicly run, well publicly run system is the answer, but that for that, expenditure on higher education has to increase substantially. A lot of money has to be channeled towards higher education on a priority basis.
Thank you. So the second question, if you allow me to ask.
Sure.
Yes. So you talked about the leadership in terms of the vice chancellor and everything.
Right.
So can you think in today's scenario that any vice chancellor dare to say the government that I do not agree with your policy? Any vice chancellor dare to say that?
Okay, Dr. Zakir, see, this is, I mean, they are political issues, but I think that what I said was that, there should be more autonomy given to vice chancellors. I mean, they should be able to run, and without any interference, without any kind of thing. I mean, that's what NEP 2020 says, but maybe the situation on the ground is slightly different, especially for state universities, state university vice chancellors. So I think, we should move to more towards a system where, you have like the IITs and IIMs, where they have their independent governing boards, and even the, all the merit based appointments, and then you have academicians making those, being appointed to those positions of high repute, and then enough academic autonomy given to institutions, because if you don't give academic autonomy to institutions, then I mean, the entire purpose of the system is defeated. So I think it's very important that, they have to. I mean, right now maybe the situation is adverse, but that is where we have to aspire to. That, like I said, I mean, I said in my, what that slide, that a vice chancellor is very different from a CEO in an enterprise, and we cannot adapt those corporate theories here. It's because they have to, manage diverse and divergent views, and carry them along. So I think that's, it's very important to have that, relationship where they can stand up and say that, this is good for the university and in the interest of the university with, and not get, yeah, I think that's very important.
Okay, thank
Mr.
you.
Rajagopala, you have your hand up and you have put some questions on chat too, but you can
Good
directly
evening.
ask.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, Dr. Malik. Thank you for your insights on the talk. Actually, I had three questions, but you answered one of those while you were giving answers for the previous question. So I'll directly go to the rest two questions that I have. First is, ma'am, you spoke about interference in appointments in higher education institutes. So, are there any measures or policy that's being framed right now, or are there any guidelines that are being put up right now to control this, to curb this?
Okay. So I think this whole idea of having an independent governing board, which will come into being, and there are also this the fact that we will have these regulators and we will have HECI, but it will not uh, there will not be interference in terms of political interference in leadership appointments, because that is very important for universities to maintain their autonomy, academic autonomy. And in fact, academic autonomy, financial autonomy, administrative autonomy has to be maintained. So the measures taken are independent governing boards that, and these have to come into being. And self governance, it should not be told from someone else that, how you should govern yourself, but self governance. And I think a lot of this, NAC accreditation and all that is going towards that NIRF ranking. But then we should also have some hand holding for institutions who are, struggling. So I think that is also that's very critical. But in terms of the interference, I mean, I think it has to be reduced. I mean, that is what NEP 2020 says, and it is shown on ground that it is not that uh, you know I mean, academicians should be appointed, and it should be merit based appointments with academics of high repute, and then only we will go back to what we had at the time of independence, because I think the situation has deteriorated a lot after that.
Thank you, ma'am. My second question is that you very correctly pointed out that there is a lack of faculty members in most of the higher education institutions. And unfortunately, the ranking systems like NIRF, they are having several quality parameters which are having a denominator in their calculation as full-time aided appointments in the institution. So even if the institution is doing pretty well in that particular criteria, the score that comes up because of lack of appointments in the institution is normally very low. So are there any discussions that is happening about revising these calculations for the ranking system?
No, it's absolutely, you're absolutely right. I think it's a very, very important question that you have raised. And I think it's very important to have these criteria to be revised from time to time, just like, it happened in the case of NAC. But I think everything will change a lot because, once the regulatory agency itself changes and it's no longer UGC and AICTE, then automatically all these changes will come in. Now the question is that it's already been 4 years since the NEP 2020, and some changes have come in, but some changes are taking slightly longer because they're more systemic changes. So that is it. But in terms of the curriculum and 4-year undergraduate program, that is happening. But in terms of the faculty recruitment, or like you said, mentioned about the faculty, the measures which are taken in order to assess an institution on the basis of NIRF. I think they are already considering that some of these things should, because NIRF itself came in because the QS ranking, and we were not satisfied with a lot of the rankings which were not rankings in Indian institutions very highly, because on research parameters and on certain publications, and also on on many aspects, it was not picking up what the Indian institutions are there, and it was leading to a sense of demoralization for the Indian institutions. So I think that has come in. Now the parameters of NIRF also will be subject to change from time to time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Malik, and good evening, all. It is a nice presentation. Actually, I have a question regarding you have shown your presentation, the maximum GR for the uh, humanities or arts subject. Actually, this maximum GR is mainly due to the interest or most of the students are unable to crack the difficult subjects. So can you give your view in this regard?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for that question. I think that, it's very important that students tend to, and I think there is a gender aspect also in this. That is, girl students, I mean, they tend to shy away from the STEM subjects. So there is a need to push forward. There is a need to push forward for STEM subjects, for science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I think it is very important to have that push if we want to compete globally, because if and yet we have to have the humanities, we have to have the social sciences. Like in IITs, we have now departments of humanities and social sciences, we have schools of public policy, but we need to have a push towards STEM. And for that, even if it is through the multidisciplinary approach, which the NEP 2020 advocates, that you can be in physics, you can take a course in music, you can be in economics, you can take a course in English. I think it will still be achieved, but it may take some time. But I think it's very important, because if we don't if we don't have this emphasis on science subjects, and one of the reasons is the difficulty level, but I think it's also to do with the kind of coaching kind of system which is coming up, which has come up, and that students are and also with the CUT exam, and all these different aspects which are coming in, we are pushing towards students, and there are seats in engineering colleges which are going vacant. And yet, when it comes to the humanities and social sciences, I mean, I can say for economics, the cutoffs are going as high as 99%. So I think now, of course, we have the CUET and you have that, but I think, a lot of things have to be done. I mean, the shadow education system, which is the coaching system, has to be regulated, because a lot of complaints are coming about that. The CUET exam has to be seen, but also we cannot have students not coming in for class 12 and things like that, uh, just preparing for the entrance exams. But in terms of difficulty level, I think there it comes to the teaching also, because, teaching of science subjects and specialized training and given to the teachers, both in post-secondary as well as higher education levels. And also good laboratories, good scientific journals, access to scientific journals, good laboratories and libraries. I think that will also make a lot of difference and go a long way in encouraging science education.
But nowadays, the access to content or resources seems to be, because of technology, it's a lot more easily available, right? Especially books and
Yes.
journals and stuff. But laboratory, yeah, hands-on components, that is, I assume, going to be a challenge for quite some while.
Yes, and I think also access to the journals, because we have the I think it's okay in university level, but in colleges and all, I think there is still a problem. In terms of the access to all the different journals and the latest editions and things like that. So and a lot of our teaching happens in colleges. It's only at the postgraduate level that they move to the universities. So there, I mean, for undergraduate science education, I think there has to be a lot of push for better resources, so that students don't just leave and go abroad. I mean, if they're welcome to go, but I mean, it's just that it should not be because of lack of resources here.
Right. In
More
astronomy, we have a
awareness
lot of
is
open
required.
journals available. Yeah.
The
Go
more
ahead.
awareness is required in undergraduate level regarding the humanity course, as well as in school level also. This awareness is required because they don't know regarding the research in humanity. All parents, all
Right.
students are thinking about the science, technology, but nobody is talking about the humanity research and what is the role of humanities in the life.
No, I think there has to be a balance, Dr. Agarwal. I think it has to be a balance, and we cannot
Yeah,
move
yeah.
towards.
And I assume
Yeah.
this
Yes.
discrepancy depends a lot on the state too, which is states are more industrialized versus which are not, or is it uniform, pretty much uniform all over the states?
No, I think it is different for different states. And I think that, I mean, some, like I showed, the GR is quite different.
Right, but
But
the
in terms of the,
discrepancy in terms of humanities versus science, is that also?
I think that is not a state issue. I mean, that is, yes, it is a state issue in terms of the southern states. because the southern states, there is a much more enrollment in technical and science subjects as compared to the northern states. But I think there has to be a balance. I mean, we can't move totally towards STEM subjects,
Right.
ignoring the humanities and social sciences. On the other hand, we can't also not pay attention to the STEM subjects. I think that's very important. And, keep on encouraging humanities and arts. But I think the departments of humanities and social sciences, I mean, I know two of my colleagues have joined in IIT Jammu and Bombay, is a welcome change. And then they have schools of public policy also. One of my colleagues is in Ashang Desai Center for Public Policy. So in IIT Bombay. And so I think, these are welcome. But it has to be the other way around also. That, universities also have to improve their science education.
But there has not been too much of a push in that direction.
I think there has been, but not enough, because the figures don't show it. I mean, the figures don't show, even if for projects and research projects, there is, ample, like what Dr. Agarwal is mentioning, maybe he's talking about also the research, because, humanities research does not get the kind of funding, because, we have to go to ICSSR or, UGC and to get funding, and it's not adequate funding, whereas the science projects, they get adequate funding. So in terms of research, maybe the funding is adequate. But in terms of the undergraduate teaching and resources, I think there is slight, there is a long way to go.
Thank you, Professor Malik. That was a great start for our program, and it was a great session on the topic. Thank you very much for joining us again.
Thank you, Professor Arunasamy, and do give my regards to Professor Dhruv Saikia.
Sure.
And
Thank you.
I wish the participants all the best for this NEP orientation and sensitization program, and for everything else also. Thank you very much.